Welcome to our program. Tonight we have Professor Peter Carravetta. He earned his PhD at NYU, and he is a professor of Italian at Queens College in Queens, New York. He, in addition to that, is also the chairman of the Foreign Languages and Literatures Department, and he has written several books of prose and poetry. Tonight we will be discussing about his latest book on poetry, which is The Sun and Other Things, a journey in poetic experience. I would like to welcome you, Professor. How are you?
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here today.
It's my pleasure to be
We
here.
have to let the audience know that we are actually friends, so it's we hope to have a nice little discussion on your book.
Definitely.
Now, you came from Italy. You were not born over here, right?
No, I was born in the province of Cosenza in southern Italy, and I came here when I was 12 years old. I lived in the Bronx for about 10 years.
Oh, so you're a Bronx man.
And yes, definitely.
And you went to City College, as I understand.
Indeed. I started out in the sciences, but midway I switched to the humanities, and I have a degree in English and creative writing, as it turns out.
You have to know that City College is my alma mater also. I believe I got out of the college in 1969, and I believe you...
And I started January of 1970, just about a year, I think, before open admission started.
I left just at the culmination of the students' activities, their political turmoil of the 60s with Vietnam. Did you see any of that thing going on at City College?
Definitely.
In fact, you wrote some poems about
yes,
that.
In this book, which covers about 25 years of my life, some of the poems actually do go back to those years, which were extremely important, exciting, and very problematic for a 21-year-old.
Before we go into the book itself, maybe you could show us some of the other books that you have, just briefly.
Okay, well, briefly, as you know, after City College, I went to study at the University of Bologna. I fell in love with the Italian language, and I published my first book of poetry in Italian. It's called Percorso Masticato, and it was exciting to rediscover and write in what basically is my native language. I also wrote a book of poems called Existence upon my return. Then I went back to Italy to do my PhD, and I wrote another book in Italian called Delle Voci, which is very much involved with the avant-garde and the experiments in language and expression, in themes, which was very much in vogue. And then I wrote another one in Italian much later, which is called Mettessi, which means participation. And he has my daughter's drawings on the cover. And I'm very proud of that.
Talking about participation, you participate, in addition to the academic activities in college, you do participate also in the social aspect of the Italian experience.
Well, yes, I have.
If I'm not mistaken, you are a member of the Association of Italian American Educators.
Well, as it turns out, I'm one of the 12 founding fathers, like the 12 apostles of the association.
Yeah.
It was very exciting, very promising, and I think we can say that we have done a good job to date in sending students to Italy. I must say that I was helped in my college education in 1969 by a scholarship donated by an association called Americans of Italian Descent, Inc. So I never knew who they were, and I would like to find out if they still exist
today on the TV.
And I would like to thank them for that.
So a scholarship does help, right?
Definitely.
The consequences are great.
In fact, when I finished my BA and I went to study at the University of Bologna, once again it was through a scholarship given by City College, was a Romance languages scholarship if I would study in Bologna.
You are also a member of the founding member of the Association of Italian American Writers.
Well,
we have had here Professor Viscusi. He talked about that organization. Maybe what is your involvement here?
Well, there's two or three issues here. One is that as writers in the English language with an Italian last name, Italian background, we found that we were having difficulty getting spots, getting spaces, being listened by the world at large. we also felt that whatever was known about Italian American literature and culture was now sort of like another generation. There was a need to create a forum for younger people, new voices, people who grew up in the 70s and the 80s. So Bob and I, in 1989 in California, after listening to Pietro Di Donato and others of the older generation say certain things about what should be the themes or what should be represented in Italian American literature, we decided that we would found our own association because we felt that the issues were different and that younger people needed access, and we created our own spaces. So basically, learning a lot from the other groups. I mean, you know, from the Hispanics and from the blacks, and a lot of the minorities have their own groups, and that's how you get started. You get some exposure and you get some support and so on.
Yeah. And now let's go to the book here, The Sun and Other Things. It's a book of poetry. Basically, it's a journey, a poetical journey. I would like to ask the question is, why is the sun and other things? Isn't the sun everything? And then is there anything else after the sun? Or what do you mean?
As you know, I am also professionally a literary critic and a philosopher. I think poetry can carry a lot of kind of wisdom also, not just images. The sun, yes, because one thing that we have in common in America or in Italy is the sun. On the other hand, the sun is used to reflect things, and it shows not just us to ourselves, but it also gives, you know, shadows, silhouettes. It's because there is that great lantern called the sun that we see things, and it's sort of established a continuity. And it's basically going back to kind of a nature, so to speak, in some way, as what we have in common, all of us. You know, me, my family, you, our interlocutors, everyone.
I see. And how did you put together the format of this book? Because there are different times, I imagine. You have different periods, time span. How was it put together?
Well, as I said, I am, as a scholar, as a student of literature, I was very much impressed by the great, you know, epics of all time. This book, made up of single individual lyrical moments, has sort of been strung together to create a kind of a narrative. There is a character called Helios, you know, that's Greek for the sun god, and then there is a character called Humanus in Latin, which means the ideal human type, and it's actually like a journey. It begins with a persona in the book asking the reader, why don't you sit and talk to me and follow what I'm doing, and then you actually are taken through a series of experiences, and you can see that through the styles. In fact, the book covers from 1971 at CCNY until about 1991, 92 here in New York. So it's grouped into 12 sort of chapters. One of them is called Exchanges, one of them is called Histories, another one is called Memories. There's a group dedicated to the art of writing, which is like what you would call a meta-poem, and they're called Poets, Letters, and Quadrangles, University Life. There is the inevitable section dedicated to mezzo cammin. All poets, when they reach 33 or 35, have to tip their hat to Dante Alighieri and say, in the mezzo del cammin di nostra vita.
In fact, I see Dante even before that.
Yes, Dante has been a constant companion of mine from the
Now,
beginning.
obviously, there are, as you said, many themes here, and we don't have the time to cover everything, but I would like to cover certain things in your reading, okay, so that our viewers may see the poem. Maybe we would like to start with the prologue itself, because I believe the first poem does justice to what it will come after in style and content.
Okay. It is all to say, you who have come such a long, long way, stranger, please stop, take a breath, sit here, chat with me. No, no, I, Socrates, am not. Do not trample so. The word the body hardly notices. It does, in fact, rarely do the damage it did, poor Socrates. Poor Socrates. Had he too gorgeous given but the chance? Had he on language bet for the truth? Nevertheless, your story is mine, and I really need not say much, you know. And I'd insist that you get a move on later in the day. But for now, please listen. And then there's a second part which actually gives you an idea of the variety of items, of things under the sun that I experienced.
But let's stay with the first one, because it seems it's a programmatic poem that will be developed later on. You call the reader or the listener as you compare it to a pilgrim. Come here, sit down, relax with me.
And then I'll take you on this journey. Do not worry, I'm not Socrates who will be killed by the word. Because
maybe you can refer a little more about Socrates reminding and Gorgias.
Well,
the meaning of
Socrates essentially, in order not to go back on his own word in the apology, the defense of Socrates, in the trial, he preferred to die, to take the hemlock, to drink it, as opposed to contradicting himself and admit that he had sort of lost his defense. At the same time, in those days, as you know, from Calabria, I'm very much influenced by Magna Graecia, by Greek thought. This other competitor of Socrates was Gorgias. Gorgias was reputed to have invented the art of rhetoric. And to me, rhetoric is not something negative. It's the art of conversation. So listen to me. Had Socrates listened to Gorgias, they probably would have had the conversation and worked out a solution. But he was too categorical in his beliefs.
You also give an advice to the reader. Words, don't worry about the words. They don't kill. They don't harm you.
No, just accept the word. Put yourself, let the words sort of transport you. And you will see all the changes, the experiences, these metamorphoses of the journey.
Maybe you do continue with the second one, that is a part of the prologue.
Well, this announces what's to come, in a kind of a summary, and it's actually what you would call a meta poem, because I'm actually the character, the person is talking to himself. Pick up the broom, the German vacuum cleaner, the non-rusting steel pad, the scrapers and sprays galore. And clean up the windows, the carpet, appliances, and the furniture. Do not invite every Tom and Dick and what's-his-face along. Do not believe that they can make out from your den the rosebuds across the street or the ideologies of self-absolvement. The raucous, jittery, uninvited pestilence, the brood of listless nights, the snake coiled in the early morning dew. For it's nothing to poke fun at, nervously to scan this splintered chunk of earth, which obviously, if you remember, it evokes Dante, che non è cosa da pigliare a gabbo, di scrivere a tutto fondo l'universo. He was describing the universe, and more humbly, I'm just describing this splintered chunk of earth. The metaphor should be clear. I'm a nomad, I'm moving out from one world, and I'm traveling through through existence.
Dante is definitely here. Okay, if we could go to another one. Obviously, we will eventually begin to notice the language. You use a variety of language. You even use foreign languages. Italian, French, Spanish, Latin, and also slang. I don't know if we'll be able to hear all these languages that you use, but is this part of your tradition, or is part of the way you felt, I imagine, during your college years?
Well, I was never, let me put it this way, my love of literature entailed not only reading different authors, but reading authors from different backgrounds. I also noticed that in the 20th century especially, it's almost impossible not to use locutions, expressions from other languages. And since I've been inspired in modern times by writers such as D'Annunzio, Joyce, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, Allen Ginsberg, how? That's where sometimes in the poems that are very angry, there are words from everyday life. And in the poems where you talk about time, there are some words that come from the Greek or the Latin, because that's appropriate to that mood or to that experience.
In one of the poem you use, I did not know if it was to be funny or to be serious, when you were escucha, listen, ascolta, in different languages.
It's actually a poem almost of desperation.
To attract the reader.
It's like, listen to me, and if you do not understand English, let me tell you in French, let me tell you in Spanish, let me tell you in Latin, but just listen to what I'm trying to say. which goes back to the theme, just come along for the experience.
Now, in the beginning, you mentioned about the study of philosophy, philosophical aspect of your specialization is not just literary criticism, but you also doing some philosophical work.
Well, I did.
In fact, you are publishing, you are the editor of a magazine,
Yes.
Differentia,
Review of Italian Thought.
which we have here. I have only 3 copies, but I would like to show it. Yeah, it is very serious, and I enjoy reading it. I became a member of this.
Thank you.
What is What is the aim
Well,
of this
here the
magazine?
problem is the following. Through circumstances, I ended up spending 3 years in Milano to do my research for my dissertation, which was on methodology, the problem of interpretation in Italian criticism. But I am fundamentally, an American. I grew up in America, I went to American universities, but none of my colleagues or my friends knew any of the Italian authors I was studying.
Yeah.
As a result, I said, we need a journal entirely in English, in which we bring over not just Italians from Italy, but also Americans writing about Italy, but in terms of contemporary issues, in terms of history of ideas, sociology, essays, not studies, not very boring stuff, but more interesting stuff. And it's gone very well.
Since you do literature, literary criticism, and philosophy, one of your poems, you are actually saying that at the beginning poetry and philosophy divided, split up.
Yes.
But today, what is the future of philosophy? It seems to me that literature, poetry, and philosophy, in a way, could be worked out.
Well, it's a good time, actually, because despite the cries that the humanities are under attack and the education is in shambles, if we look at what the advent of real technology, of the virtual space and the blending of styles and the merging of currents, that may seem confusing to many, but actually for a poet, a writer, a philosopher is very good, because poetry and philosophy originally had the same origin. Then, as I argue in a book, which is very philosophical, they split for about 2,400 years. Today is a time where philosophy has rediscovered language. No more Socrates, but Gorgias. And literature instead uses all the rational means available to renew itself. Literature is constantly renewing itself. Great literature is always avant-garde literature, so to speak. So I think we can actually work better now with both without thinking of separate categories.
There are many poems in this book which are philosophical in approach. I would say philosophical poetry here. Or
in some ways.
There are some lyricals,
yes.
but there was, I think, the bulk of it.
There's also love poems in there.
Love poems. In fact, we would like to go to 2 subjects, if you like, rather than. One is on writing, which I found very interesting, and then on love.
Okay.
Or poetry and love. I don't know, maybe you would like to go to
Which one?
44?
Page 44.
It gives a definition of poetry,
Okay.
which I felt it was interesting.
This is a poem written in 1977. It's called The Time of the Composition. And in the end, Helios, my main character, confronts the state of the art, so to speak. What is a poem? What should a poem do or be? Don't ask me whether I still believe in that today, but I certainly believed in this for 20 years.
All right.
A poem should be the most tortuous and upsetting experience both writer and reader or listener ever run against, as it should blast asunder all previous concepts of life and memory and momentarily allow the interpenetration, the envisioning, the understanding of the flux of being as that whole that extends from the sense of existence to the associated word and image, finally to living itself.
It's very dynamic.
Very ambitious, I think.
Very ambitious. But you say you changed now? Is this?
Well, I was younger, so I was much more of an idealist. I think as you get older, you sort of,
The wording, but it is dynamic, certainly.
It is dynamic, yes.
If we would like to go now on the page 30 about the world and nothing else, I thought maybe you can...
This has to do with the fact that to an artist, his work, her work, really their religion, what counts above all. And a lot of times that causes problems even in families when you have a young kid who's a musical genius and all he does is music, and you say, but I want him to get a degree in medicine, you know, or someone who loves to dance, and you just have to throw yourself into that. For the writer, it is the word, really. And as someone who has lived between two languages and two cultures, ultimately, I think the right word in any language is what it's all about, at least for us.
I was reading also more also on the political aspect. The word being the country and nothing else but a country for one, and eliminating probably the geographical
you see, but these are the kind of contradictions or the kind of polarities within which a poet works.
Yeah.
On the one hand, yes, it's part of the avant-garde. The word is what counts, just maybe like the image to the photographer or the sound bar, you know, to the musician. However, that does not mean necessarily that the writer is totally detached from reality. If we go back to some of the stuff written at City College during the student movements, and when we were questioning everything, and you sort of come into your own, if you remember. I mean, I think you graduated just in the nick of time, so to speak. Yeah. When I went to City College, the ROTC was just burned down, and there were strikes, and there were, you know, problems with violence, and we were really accusing our leaders that things were not just working, you know, that we didn't want the war, you know, and stuff like that. Yeah. So the poetry can be very political. In fact, if we have a second, I'll read you a couple of things.
Of course, about, we may have a little time.
This is Helios, and it's a poem which was put together basically 15 years later, a kind of a recollection, and it's many voices. But the character here, Helios here, recollects what it's like to be a student working full-time and going to school. Days on end without money to spend, and many a dank corner to piss at. Friends, peers, colleagues by the thousand, mothering the universities and the proliferation of analysts. True, you have seen and heard about depravity, tamed Führers, and typecasting. But we must be silent. How dare you to appeal? For the authorities really do know what's good for us. And then we got to admit they were trained specifically to maintain each organism dangling on a string, reflected a million ways, unseen external forces guiding its swing, contriving the balance, carving the proper course. And then it continues, some have heard howl. Howl is Allen Ginsberg's book, which to us was like a Bible. Some have heard howl right from the gut and braced for electric bodies reel through drizzle and poorly lit hallways, again and again resolving to be something, licking their wounds. Some I've seen have been the working force from disparate lands, uglified, gloomy accents askew, reinventing their trades and wrestling with facades, welding trestles for the essences to redouble, long were the hours and humility debauched, tracking humiliations, extolling toughness, pursuing the self, the life, the miracle, the uncertain dream, one's dream, that is the dream. Of course, no one would want the capital to undo history or to neglect its uniform priorities. There's more than Watergate at stake here, and that, of course, dates the poem. In a later edition, I put down, change Watergate to Iran-gate. And now, of course, we would have to put down, change it to Monica Lewinsky or something like that, you know, just to bring the poem up to date.
Because we don't have much more time. Unfortunately, our time is running. Why don't we read the one on the poetry and love narration on page 97, maybe?
Page 97. Well, this is actually, it's a complete poem made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts.
No,
it's
just
kind
narration, just narration. With the, obviously, this is not the whole poem, but only...
This has to do with meeting a friend after many, many years. And we sort of reflect on how we had changed both.
Mm-hmm. Narration.
So in the swirl of the riddles, we met at a crossroads of our paved ways, out of the way amidst congealed crowds and faceless high-risers, two emotional nomads, two sulky sentimental rovers, suddenly seeking a fusion, a clearing unrelated to the papered walls. For the need was to see how truly we have changed, how far or near each is to the other, the uttermost sincerity, the uppermost honesty, you and I, each alone in love, each one of us in love, and yet alone.
Okay. I would like you to read the CCNY, page 36.
All right, back to CCNY. Okay, this is what sometimes young people do when they're in college. They just sit in one corner and stare and think. In this particular case, I was seeing a fellow student. She was very beautiful, and I started thinking like a poet sometimes does, just looking.
Let's hear.
Okay, it's in CCNY snack bar, loving Norma. Norma was the girl's name, as I found out later. A thin scent of blue, the decor of each lid mild, nose line define Greek and English, and lips that lovely surely speak, lovely, rosy, temptingly magic. A solitary beam from the outside strikes her parted midnight mane, defines her shoulder line, her breasts part of the thigh, she's aglow. The envied by Venus aspect, in 3 seconds flat I pair her with fair Renaissance maidens and Madonnas, with pre-Raphaelite allusions, and then zoom in to modern poster vixens. She's all of them, and then some. But for an instant, an hour, I muse on her intense gaze into a book, floating on the earthy composure, the casual hesitation of the slender fingers. She's reading the Panseas, I think. All silent music of this image divine become flesh, a few feet away from me in trance, the beauty and the wisdom, the odor and the halo of a vision. This is Norma, or rather will be. Sorry about my voice.
No. Obviously, we have noticed you have a little cold. We basically, I wish we could do more, especially one that was, I'm the lover and you are the loved one. I thought that was a beautiful point, but we don't have the time. Maybe we have to postpone it for another day.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we would like to say goodbye now, and we hope to see you again at our next program, when we will bring to you another author, Italian-American author or poet, and I'm sure you will enjoy the same quality author we have, as Professor Carravetta is here tonight to present, or has presented, his poetry. I would like to say goodbye and see you next time for the same kind of programming.